Buenas tardes.
Okay, so good evening, everybody. Welcome to Telefónica Foundation, Fundación Telefónica. It's great to welcome you during this rainy evening. So thank you very much for coming along, especially in such a difficult evening to be here face to face. But thank you to everybody that is watching us on the internet. I'm Pablo Gonzalo. I'm in charge of Telefónica Foundation Auditorium. It's a great pleasure to have Sheila Krimashi here, who is the manager of the Hay Festival. Thank you very much for being here. And in order to introduce this event about technological humanism and the challenges that AI has, we're going to make a brief introduction, both Sheila and myself. We don't want to take much time from the event, but I would like to thank, first of all, Hay Festival, La Vanguardia, the Italian Cultural Institute and the Italian Embassy for their support and for making this event come true. I would like to say thank you, and the truth is that, well, I would like to congratulate Hay Festival, because I've already told Sheila, but this is the first chance that I can say this in public. Congratulations on your Asturias Princess Award on Communication and Humanities. It's a great award, and you really deserve it. Yeah, a big round of applause, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Es un gusto y nosotros, la verdad es que
It's a great pleasure. And as we've been working together with Hay for 7 years, we're really excited to see all this. It's very well deserved. So this year from the foundation, we're going to collaborate in 2 events with the Hay. One of them is the one that we're holding today here, and we're going to enjoy in a minute. And the other one will be the day after tomorrow, on Thursday in Segovia, and I think that they complement each other. Starting by the one on Thursday, we're going to speak about creativity in the digital ecosystem, and I think that it's going to be a great event because it's going to be a blow up of creativity. Creativity that has to do with technology and a very special proof of how technology can be used to foster what makes us more human, what makes us really human beings. This creativity, this need of communicating, of conveying emotions, ideas, you name it. We're going to speak about narrative, literature, art, technology. And it's going to be a very special event, and it's possible not only for our collaboration because of the involvement of IE University and the Banco de Sabadell Foundation. And we're going to speak about another more critical topic, and this is all the challenges that AI sets. And following the line of what we foster from the foundation, this technological humanism. For us, it's just that people should be first and technology after. And technology has to be at people's service and not the other way around. So it's going to be a very special year, and we are delighted to collaborate once again. And you have the floor, Sheila.
Primero que nada, first of all, I would like to thank all the institutions that have made this event possible. First of all, the Istituto de Cultura Italiano, the Italian Embassy, and the La Vanguardia newspaper that is celebrating with us their 140-year anniversary, and of course, the Fundación Telefónica that has renewed. It was over seven agreements, cooperation agreements that is so valuable for us. The Renaissance, is the axis on which we have based the festival this year, but the pandemic has shown us that no Renaissance is possible without the renewal of the connection between human beings and nature. Starting from this point, we have established several debates, some of them with nature and some of them thanks to Fundación Telefónica, regarding humanism and technology. Today, I'm going to introduce the moderator and also the person who had the idea of today's roundtable, who is Miquel Molina. Miquel is an author, he's a journalist. I have his full CV here. He's also deputy director of Vanguardia, and he writes an article every week about global cities and about the transforming power of culture. He has written in 2018, he wrote an essay with ideas to renew the city of Barcelona with cultural projects, and currently he's giving some thought to a new essay that seems to be going to be ready very soon, including the technological aspects this time. He made me say that he is not an expert in artificial intelligence nor in technology. However, he is a driver of a global debate on the new humanism, or humanism broadly speaking. So this is the point where we made the connection with what we want to debate about this year in Segovia. So thank you, everyone, and let's let the show start.
Buenas tardes, gracias a...
Good evening. Thank you very much to Hey Festival and Fundación Telefónica, Telefónica Foundation, that together with Vanguardia, we've made this discussion come true. And it's a great honor to have the people that we have on the round table. So thank you to everybody that's following us and people that are watching on streaming. So this is one of the previous events of Hey Festival that, as a festival in Segovia, will kick off on Friday. And it's a great honor to be here. Last year, it was one of the few festivals in the world that was able to be held with some normality. And we, in fact, we had a record. We didn't spread the virus, so we did things very well. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the people that are here with me this evening. So we have Nerea Luis Mingueza, who has a PhD in computational sciences. She's the co-founder of TechFest, an annual event about technology and innovation that before the pandemic had brought together more than 2,000 people, and she's part of the AI team of the technological solution company Singular, and she's very well known for her willing to spread technology. In January 2018, she joined Techotech Foundation as an expert in talent and gender, and in 2019 she received the award to the civil merit by the King. Francesca is an economist and she's an expert in digital politics. I met Francesca in Barcelona. She was a digital commissioner and head of technology of the first mandate of the of Ada Colau, the mayor. She fostered the leadership of Barcelona towards the recovery of data for citizenship with the participation of different cities. Later on, she was designated as the Italian Innovation Fund. She's a honorary professor at the University College of London, and she is an advisor about digital reasons for the United Nations. Some years ago, Ursula von der Leyen appointed her as a high-level commissioner of the New Bauhaus in Europe. I'd like to get started by a sentence that was said in June at the Digital Future Society meeting in Barcelona. This sentence was by Yuval Harari. He said that AI can be used to create a digital dictatorship or to create the best healthcare system in the world. And this is an ethical and political system that has to be decided by human beings. I would like to start the discussion by asking our speakers, where are we closer to this point or to the other one? If you come on, break the ice.
I'm going to start speaking about my side of it, which is more the technical part. To me, it was a great discovery, especially when I started speaking about artificial intelligence, the number of layers that this discipline has, because technology has shown us that it can break all barriers, and now we are getting to the AI revolution, and what we're seeing is that it's acting as a catalyzer, or this is the way I see it, at least traditionally. Those of us who have been working and programming, engineers, both female and men, what we see is a computer with different code lines, and we don't see beyond that. However, the impact that we can have with all our ideas, with all our apps and developments, has a global scope. With AI, we have a new factor, which is all the automation, all the impact that reaches its goal much faster thanks to the fast learning of data. So I would agree with this sentence. I've heard other sentences, other claims very similar to that one, and I think we are at the point where we need to sit down and speak, and I've seen this in many debates that I have come to be part of, and I like this type of debates because we need to sit around the same table, both technicians and politicians and people who are in charge of making the policies or who are in charge of labor rights, because what we see is that AI, especially that is affecting people, if we don't put some ethics into it, or if there is no surveillance, or if the algorithm is not explainable, it will make it very difficult for us to develop a world where we can all live in. At this time, this is not the case, and we will see this throughout the debate. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the invitation. Hey Festival and Fundación Telefónica, La Vanguardia newspaper, Istituto Italiano de Cultura, and the Embassy. I will be speaking in English, forgive me. There is a translation, I believe, so...
Dictatorship or
the best health system in the world.
Right, so I've been framing it slightly different than dictatorship or the best possible way, but I agree that we are, let's say, at a crossroads right now, in particular in the post-pandemic times. I think during the pandemic, we have been reflecting quite a lot about this issue because we saw a really fast digitalization of our life. And I think, just to pick up on what you said at the very last thing, this digital life is becoming not something only for geeks or for technology experts, but is really entering in everybody's life. So starting from smart working, distance education, food delivery online, digital healthcare or contact tracing application, we saw a really exponential growth of digital technologies coming into our life. I think at that point we realized on one side how much digital connectivity, digital infrastructure, data, artificial intelligence are becoming essential, critical infrastructures of our society, upon which basic services, school and education, healthcare, living in cities, fighting climate change, depend upon. So these are critical infrastructures, and we said we need to give to people access as a human right. So we realized the importance in our life. At the same time, of course, we realize more and more the risk of those technologies, so not only the potential, and in particular, I would say a very strong dependence that governments, that in particular in Europe, we have on very few companies that are controlling those digital technologies and infrastructures. I think we will come back to those points, but me as an economist, I'm observing how much the digital economy today is concentrated. We see probably the most important concentration of industrial power, market power, and social power we've seen in the history of the Industrial Revolution. So we have 5 to 7 big tech companies that are controlling the cloud, the hardware, the software, the data that we use, and that their market evaluation, I mean, around 8 to 9 trillion US dollars, is bigger than the entire evaluation of the European stock market. So obviously, as a society, we have to do something. And I mean, just to make it short, this first intervention, I've been saying that we used to see our digital future in a binary way. On one side, we see the big tech Silicon Valley model, Google, Apple, Amazon, Facebook, which are coming to control. So these big data monopolies that are more and more controlling our healthcare and cities and mobility and our data. And Shoshana Zuboff from the Harvard Business School has been calling this big tech Silicon Valley model surveillance capitalism. This is because the currency of the digital economy is our data. So these companies become richer and richer with a business model that's based on the manipulation and monetization of personal information and data. On the other side, we have the big state. So the Chinese model, which is a little bit Orwellian, I would say, that looks a bit this kind of digital authoritarianism, right? This also looks very effective. For example, I can fight the pandemic, or I can say I fight climate change if I control the whole population in a centralized way. I monitor you every day, I tell you what to do, and of course you obey because this is what the state tells you to do. In the short term, this may be also effective, but in the long term, of course, we are giving away our fundamental liberties and freedom. So I think that both the big tech model and the big state model are not tailored for democracies. So I've been saying we need a third way, and I finish here, which is big democracy. And this is what Europe should be put forward, which is exactly this kind of digital humanism, which is like deploying the potential of digital technology for the people and the planet, and then setting our own values and rules on how to do that.
Para seguir con el hilo de esta conversación.
Well, just to continue this conversation, Francesca, all the details of the European policy. Do you think that this possibility is real? I mean, that Europe assumes this role of becoming into such a powerful element that, besides having this decentralized,
a very big question, and I want to stay of course, I think is our role, otherwise we wouldn't be doing this, I think both of us, from a different angle. At the end, if we are working in it, is because we believe it's possible to give it a different direction. I think it's necessary to give it a direction. This is the main thing. So coming back, really to your question, we cannot just accelerate digitization. We need to give it a direction. So we need to say, we need artificial intelligence and data to fight climate change. We need it because we want to decrease, polarization of wealth, because we want to enhance democracy, because we need this ecological transition to happen. We need to give it an objective. I think Europe is lagging behind, but on what? Because Europe has always been seen as the big regulator of the digital age. So I think everybody would agree that Europe is very good when it comes to setting the rules for digitalization. I mean, just a few examples, we have the GDPR, the Data Protection Regulation, which is the de facto e-privacy law in the world. We are pretty good in antitrust, so we are setting the measures to say, okay, if companies are too big, we need to have fair competition, so we need to do something about that. We are very active in proposing to tax the digital companies, because of course if we cannot tax them, we cannot use the wealth that they create to invest in infrastructure and in healthcare and in education. And we're also actually pretty good when it comes to labor market, for instance, regulating the gig economy, so making sure that workers have their rights. However, I think that regulating is not enough. So if Europe wants to be leading in the future of the digital space, we also have to be able to compete in scientific and technological innovation, which I think, and I want to know if we agree here, Europe needs to have its own companies. Like, we need to have our own technological and scientific capacity. We need to have our own equivalent. I mean, I posted something on Twitter, I told you a few days, actually yesterday, from the Financial Times, that says, I see no reason why we cannot have our own Google and Amazon. Maybe different. Maybe we don't want to have that monopolies. Maybe we want to have a federated, open source, ethical, accountable digital ecosystem, but it has to be made in Europe. So these technologies have to be made in Europe. So this I'm very convinced, and for that we need industrial policy. We need Next Generation EU, we need big investment, we need long-term capacity, and we need to do this at European level. I don't think it's enough that Germany, France, Italy, Spain, they do their own national policies. We have to come together and have maybe the first European data, infrastructure or companies which is going to be managed in an ethical way. So I think we have to all work for that. And finally, I will tell you, for me, it is not just a matter of national security, which has to do a lot with geopolitics. If you want, we can expand later on. It is not only about European competitiveness when it comes to industrial capacity, but it is about democracy. So ultimately, when we see where these companies are really strong, they risk to be replaced in the Habermasian public sphere. I mean, we are shifting the locus of democracy from elected parliaments to the boardroom of the server farms of these big tech companies. And then we let them to regulate it. I mean, this is not possible. We will have, again, Cambridge Analytica. We will have, again, our data being violated. We will have, basically, a real problems when it comes to the protection of the fundamental rights, civil liberties, non-discrimination of gender, socio-economic race, and so on. Because it is not possible that the big tech companies are regulating something that should be a matter of democracy. So it should be about societies, the sovereign people, and elected accountable governments that are up for, giving a direction to this technological society we're going to be living in.
Ojalá Europa sea capaz de asumir.
I wish Europe is able to assume this challenge, to that milestone of the European Spaceship Agency. That would be a case that should be followed. When I was preparing the discussion, I was having a look at different speeches from Nerea Luis and seeing her concern, especially because of the sexist bias that AI could have. I need to tell an anecdote, and when I was drafting some of the remarks and the general topics that we were going to tackle, and I translated this through Google Translate in order to send it to Francesca, and Nerea Luis started to be he, and not she, because the algorithm considered that Luis was more important than Nerea, and this is what happened.
Yes, well, there are several things in the line of what you've been talking about. I really agree with Francesca's position. She has said something that I believe it's very important, and it has to do with the fact that the people who work in the technical world are not capable of regulating, and we are accountable, but we cannot really establish the rules. And I think Europe will be very important as an actor in the coming year. But focusing on the question that you asked me, what happened to me is that around 2019, I finished my PhD thesis, and I was quite unaware of what was going on at a social level regarding machine learning. And one of the things that I was getting obsessed with was what was going on in technology and with regards to women. Google had given me a scholarship, an award, and they put together 20 women from different parts of Europe to talk about our present, our lives, and being aware that you are actually going to a place such as this that was hosted by Google. And I was very much aware what was going on with all the data and all the systems. And it's very easy to see all this on the press, on the media, because these things tend to have bad press. And in the media, you can see many cases, in particular regarding these big tech companies that Francesca was mentioning. And I was wondering why these cases are always in the light. Well, they come about because they are the leaders in the technological revolution. This could have happened in Spain or Japan, but the fact is that these companies are the ones that are taking the lead. In January 2020, I was here for the first and last time before the pandemic, and I remember talking with people from the cultural industry, and I talked about the monopoly that there was, and many people didn't have this view at this time. We're using several data logs, and I'm talking about AI applied to people. In other cases, this is not so relevant, but if I want to make a face recognition, or if I want to have an automatic translation, for instance, each of us has a different context. The way I perceive the world here in Madrid is completely different from the view that I might have if I were in a USA university or in a technological center in Japan, both in terms of the demography, gender, ethnics, and in particular, with all this revolution going on, with all these communities like the trans people, etc., how do we approach this from the technological viewpoint? It's very difficult because this is not represented yet in the digital world. I think that something that we can all understand is the example that we see with drugs. Women have had many more secondary effects coming from drugs because they have not been tested on women, because we believe that everyone is the same, we're all similar. And we tend to have this this viewpoint on everything. If I have a team with several engineers and one or two women or none, it's very difficult for me if I don't have this gender specific viewpoint, if I don't think about diversity, if I don't think about the social impact, it's very difficult for me to take the lead. So what's going on right now with the AI in the past years, in particular from 2017, 2018, we start measuring things, and this starts creating a lot of tension around these domain. There's a very well-known case with Google Photo, where they bring out a picture and they auto-label this picture, and you see two black people that are tagged with the label gorillas. And or you were just telling me that because of my name I was tagged as a he. These things are starting, the trend of the machine learning, which is the more opaque trend, is the one that is growing. There are other trends that are related with logistics and with algorithms that are easier to trace. But what's happening with machine learning is that we are focusing in improving the models, what we call the accuracy, but we have not focused in opening all these black boxes. Once you open these figurative black boxes, you start seeing all these things that we have taken for granted. And I really liked the title of this debate, because we talked about the technological humanism, because at the end of the day, it's human beings creating the algorithms, and we all are biased. And I was wondering why, or I've been asked why I care about this bias. Well, if we take care of all these aspects, as Francesca said, it's not about stopping innovation. It's about what she said. It's about keeping the freedoms, keeping the liberties and the well-being at a social level. The way that I can relate to technology needs to make me feel well. And all the technicians have a lot to say about this. In the last year, many people have been talking about algorithms and applicability, and I'm involved in many projects myself. And what I see is that we have to face the disappointment in the end user and the drama that the end user experiences when they feel discriminated. But also, you create a lack of expectations from all the customers and these could be companies or institutions, because sometimes technology is not ready, and now maybe we are just at the point where people within the technological domain do not have the right answers for all these issues that are taking place right now. So how can I decide which variables influence this result? And I think right now it's a time for us to talk, to discuss this, and establish mechanisms that surveillance mechanisms and auditing the algorithms to reflect about why this term is so necessary right now and how Europe can lead all this domain, all this field. And I think that is something that we will be hearing a lot about, and new jobs will be created in the future.
Someone from Newsroom that is called Maite Rios, that is an expert on these topics, suggested me to ask you the following question. Do you think that at some point in time we'll have to reivindicate the right that in a job interview or decision about a medical treatment has to be with a human being instead of the algorithm?
I think that human beings in the coming 10, 15 years will still be in their place. I doubt that people will dare to make a decision just based on a machine decision, depending on the area. Some of them are more developed than others, but I think that we will be needing the final supervision, because something that is happening, and I think we see this with the autonomous cars. I think that we all pretend to be very brave, and this makes me smile, because we're all used to using the smartphone. We are surrounded by technology. We are used to turning Netflix on and being told what we want to see instead of deciding ourselves. But when it comes to something related to our health or to our mortgages, we do not like anybody else to decide for us. But something that we really dislike is when we hear about the autonomous car, and we hear that it's going to drive better than us, and we don't believe that. And I think that I've realized that people are not humble in the face of machines. We don't understand how the autonomous driving can be safer than a person driving a car. So I think we will go through a period where we will have to learn how to coexist, machines and ourselves. The problem is the hybrid spaces. We have been talking for 20 years about robots, and we still do not have them in our lives. We have been talking about how to accelerate all the medical tests, and still all the triage and all the screenings that take place in the health centers still take time. So I think that in the coming 10, 12 years, this might accelerate, but we will probably be humbled throughout this period because of the way that the machines are thinking that is completely different from ours. And we need to find a place where the human beings will have a surveillance role, an analytic role, rather than a controlling role. And the machine will be subject to doing all the repetitive tasks that also leads to a different debate regarding the job or work automation. And I think we can do this right. I don't think we should be afraid. I think that we need to take it seriously, though. And just to finish, I think that this is something that we think it's very far, and this might mean that it's not within the political agenda, and this will make the issue bigger and bigger. I think that Europe is finally taking a position, but I think that it's key that in the coming 5 years we will have the mechanisms to use all the things that are in the lab into our lives.
No, I agree very much. I mean, I see other problems here. Like, for instance, I was very concerned when I saw that AI research at the moment, in particular the high impact ones, so the AI research published in the best papers, and also where the experiments happen, also machine learning and neural networks and all these kind of things, it's only 15% is open source. The rest is not accessible. Meaning that when we are discussing auditability, explicability, accountability, well, if we cannot access the data set, if we cannot see inside the black box, how are we going to do? And in particular now that billions, if you look at strategies, national government, agencies, the European Union, we are putting billions into the development of artificial intelligence for a variety of reasons. Well, I think this public research that we pay, we should be able to say this should be open source, meaning that people can study it, that we can evaluate, we can analyze, we can assess, right, the impact. And then we can make sure that more people are capable, because I think there is another problem there. How many people are able to audit these systems? I was thinking about this also. Working in government, I mean, for me, in a very, like, you know, small example, anyway, Barcelona, not so small, but anyway, a small example. When I had to implement my data policy for the smart city of Barcelona, which it was all about creating data commons and, you know, fair and ethical, ethics, security, and data sovereignty by design. So we had to design system differently. My first problem was how to train the public officials and the people in the administration that had to do this work. And, you know, that is where I really value this conversation of, first of all, we need more people, and it's so minimal, the amount of people that are capable, and you know what? They're all being hired at the moment by Google, by Facebook, by Amazon, by Alibaba, by Tencent, so. You know, we're also going to be able to retain these talents, pay them well, and say, look, you can also work for the public interest. I mean, this has to happen. I don't want to hear advocate, but, you know, otherwise we are going to be left without the expertise that we need to develop these systems in the future. I think this is very important. I mean, another question is, of course, access to data, but I don't even tell you that. I mean, this data is locked into the systems. I mean, it belongs, I mean, actually, all the data that we produce, it's now proprietary. Mm-hmm. And many companies will tell you, even if they want to collaborate, will tell you, well, but you know, these models are intertwined with our proprietary infrastructure. So we cannot open it. It's impossible. We have to give up our, you know, intellectual property rights. So, well, okay, we have to tackle this question. I think data sovereignty is a part of that, and Europe, anyways, even as a continent, should get back this data, because anyways, this data that we produce, healthcare, the data about CO2 emission, the data about our cities, the data about, you know, work environment, every data we produce, it belongs to us. I mean, it is our common treasure. It is the most important asset of our time. So we, as a society, we should be able to own it back. And then, you know, the question of, Yeah, so the question of this collaboration, I wanted to pick up on what she said, very important. The collaboration, I mean, I think I totally agree on the human, non-human aspect, so I don't need to add anything. I think we also should put nature in the mix. She said at the very beginning, I mean, we actually enter in a kind of crisis of the Anthropocene. We like to say we are going to be in control, but actually we're going to be human, machine, non-human elements, and also natural elements, much more integrated. I think the future goes in that direction. So we need to rethink our model, integrating the non-human as well. And I think this is a totally, big thing for society. And then I wanted to pick up on the collaboration between technical people, regulators, policymakers, but anybody else in society, artists, scientists, city planners, humanists, because we really need this conversation to happen. Otherwise, we end up, and I finish, in this terrible world where we have a fantastic regulation. It's called the GDPR. I really like it. I mean, I have to say I've contributed. I think it's a good piece of legislation. The way it's implemented is this kind of cookie directive, right? I mean, a human being has to go there, and you have all these preferences that nobody understands, and the way to tweak it, nobody understands it, so it's not implemented. How about we work more with the people that understand the technology, and we say, look, okay, this is what we want to achieve, and they help us to come up with a solution that will be much more easy for people. So why don't we make cryptography easy for people? Why don't we, find a way to make privacy-enhancing technology accessible to everybody? This is a task of the politicians. So maybe also the politicians have to understand these questions better, because if we don't have this collaboration, we're not going to get out of this situation. So we're going to build systems that maximize for whoever builds it. So I go back now to the question that, okay, it's nice to have this abstract talk. At the end of the day, if a corporation is so powerful and they want to maximize for eyeballs because they're making money with advertising, they will maximize that behavior. So why do we get fake news and conspiracy theory? I'm sorry. It's not because of the technology, it's the business model, right? It is the business model that maximizes that. If we want to maximize, let's say, fighting climate change, people cleaning their streets, democracy, education, we need to build algorithms that maximize also those kind of things. So if we want more women in tech, so what it maximizes, what are those algorithms about? It's the business model. So then, we cannot avoid to talk about that as well, because otherwise it seems it's only about philosophy and principles, which is nice, but who is in control? So who owns those technologies today?
El tema que plantea, claro, este abstract talk.
Well, the stop abstract is what we're doing right here. And now I'm going to get a little bit out of the box in order to go to the framework as the last round before giving the floor to the audience so that they can ask questions. Nerea, do you think that Spain, Barcelona, Madrid, maybe collaborating, have a role to play in technological humanism? Because we have an important concentration of important companies. We have a technological emerging community that's very interesting too. We have the Mobile World Congress. We have political energy that is really overwhelming sometimes. So do you think that this can progress? Do you think that we can be a global discussion hub in terms of technological humanism?
I believe so. And aside the fact that we have very good talents and we need to retain these talents. And sometimes it's very difficult, in particular when we talk about public institutions. I believe that Spain has something that other countries in Europe don't have, which is the connection with Central America and Latin America around the Spanish language. This could be another bias. The way we drive the creation of models that work specifically with Spanish or with different variants of Spanish around the world. And I think that has been driven from the Ministry of Science, right now the Segovia, the Secretary for Artificial Intelligence. So there is an interest in this, and we need to find those clusters. But I think that this has started being down, and I hope that we will see the result of this in the coming years. I think we need to be in touch, in particular with those that are based here. We need to be in touch with politicians and set those bridges and explain what we're concerned about, because we might be out of the market and nobody wants that. Sometimes when we talk about economy, we understand each other very quickly. And why don't we open those groups, study groups in different shapes? I understand the Digital Future Society in Barcelona, the Barcelona Riyadh that was set up. So there have been many drivers that have put in touch many people. And I want to think that this will be useful looking forward. And in relation with Europe, I think that following the global guidelines, I think that we have not done a bad job. When we talk about regulation, in particular from my viewpoint from the technical side and how it is fitted into the artificial intelligence, I find it so difficult. We are still very far. We're still talking about strategies that are very far from the present, and then you get Google or Facebook and they change the rules of the game completely. Facebook has said that they have an invention that will make cookies disappear in 1 or 2 years. So how can we predict everything that this big techs will try to implement? And it doesn't have to be something bad, but it is an example of the changing world that we are living. So I have a clear position on this. I think that we see a lot of interest in Spain, and that we will be able to profit from our language and use this towards the big corporate.
¿No lo ves desde fuera?
So Francesca, now that you're seeing this from out of the room, how can you feel this?
No, I mean, I think that that Europe should have this role. I mean, I will go back to my conviction that is at this point we need to think pan-European. And I like very much to see, for example, cities to have a big role, as you know, because cities are really well positioned to do experiments. You know, cities are a really interesting place to bring together the academia, the startups, the big companies, the civil society, but also the public administration, and to run real experiments. So to say, for instance, how will 5G impact on the mobility? Well, let's do a test bed and we try it and we learn from the experiments. How about healthcare and what we do with data? And we can run experiments. Same with education. I mean, because I think this is also part, you cannot just regulate or you cannot just do commercial project. For the future technologies, you need to regulate while you experiment what it means. So I really believe in this space where cities become laboratories and where you orient the innovation towards some public interest goals. So you say, let's fight climate change. I mean, really, honestly, we have to really put technology and innovation at the service of the ecological transition. If we don't understand this, we are done as a species. I mean, we won't exist anymore as humanity. So this is the biggest challenge we're facing. If we cannot leverage all the power of this collective intelligence, technology, connectivity, artificial intelligence, data, quantum, microchips, to do what? I mean, now we see the microchips as one big thing in the geopolitical space. Yeah, everybody's talking about that. Europe has the objective to have 20% more microchips made in Europe. China is fighting with the US for microchips. There is a big case which is ARM versus NVIDIA. I mean, this is the most exciting field. But to do what? Who needs microchip? And I think, you know, we need to move towards electric mobility, we need to lower CO2 emissions, we need to decarbonize, we need to change our lifestyle. I mean, this is the objective. So why don't we orient this? I mean, to do this, we need society to be involved, right? I mean, companies are not going to do it alone. So I think that Barcelona, Madrid, I mean, this forum that you mentioned, they're having a very big role. I mean, I know for Barcelona, we did a lot of experiments that became part of the UN program. They call me all around the world and say, okay, we want to have data as a common good. We want to have privacy-enhancing technologies with data. And Europe has a lot of talent. I mean, I don't know your expertise there, but even if you look contact tracing application for COVID, at the end, they were implemented by Apple and Google. The model they used, it was a privacy-enhancing technology model made by European researchers, all of them, you know, in Lausanne, FPLP, in like all around Europe, that came up with the system, and Apple and Google said, yes, this is great, let's just do it there. So we have the talent and the capacity in fields which are going to be very important for the future. We just need to really use it much more. So anyway, I believe that we have to couple our technology capacity and scientific capacity with our vision and our, you know, values for the future, and believe that actually there is a space for that. Because otherwise we will always be backwards. We will always say, well, you know, these companies are too big to regulate, they will just innovate. But I mean, come on, we are able to give a vision for the future that put people at the center, that put workers' rights, environmental rights, citizens' participation, because we want to live in a democracy, right, in the future. And this can be our model. And I agree very much with what you said about Latin America, Africa. I mean, there is a global world that is not the US and China, where Europe can actually be a really let's say, multilateral force. So multilateralism after the pandemic is, again, you know, we understand we cannot do it alone. We need global solutions for global problems. And I think that's where Europe can do a lot with this kind of vision, working with Latin America, Africa, and global South.
Abrimos ahora el debate para quien quiera.
So let's open up the floor if you want to ask any questions. We have some mics around.
Tenemos que dar tiempo a esperar para que la gente que...
So we have to give some time so that people on streaming are not missing anything. So first of all, thank you very much for you. Thank you very much to you all. I'm Irene Lozano. I'm a regional MP, and this is a great matter of concern to me. I would like you to elaborate a little bit on that attention economy, because everything that has to do with data, I think that it has to do with the business model problem, but I think that regarding the attention that captures our will, our way of thinking, our desires, wishes, etc. I think that there's a problem when designing technology, but I would like to know your opinion. And very briefly, if Francesca, as you are advising Ursula von der Leyen, I would like you to explain how could we speed up the legislation processes, because, for example, the AI regulation that was passed some months ago, until it is transposed to the national regulation, well, what you've said about cookies, there will be new innovations, or even we should think of a new different model in order to legislate before. I mean, in order for you to market this technology, you need to abide by these requirements before chasing the technology companies. Thank you very much to you both.
Start? Yeah, we just answer? Yes?
Yes.
Shall I start, or you want to?
Go on.
Well, on the business model, yeah, we can we can say a bit more. I think that the problem, if you look at the digital ecosystem today, is that those companies, I mean, the evaluation of those companies, which I said before, it's actually incredible how it grew during the pandemic, no? So all the other industries were losing money and were losing people and his unemployment and almost in a recession during the COVID-19, and the technology companies' evaluation skyrocketed. So they like their evaluation is higher of like 1.1 trillion US dollars, and they reached the real peak when it comes to market power. So obviously we have a concentration of market power, and of course those companies are investing a lot in research and development, like really a lot. So around maybe 20 billion per year. If you take a company like Google or Amazon, I mean, this is a lot. Think about how governments, I don't know the Spanish government, how much it invests, but definitely less. And also our biggest companies in Europe invest less. And I mean, if you look at the main of their business model, I mean, the problem is on one side the question of data. So what they do with data, and well, yes, the business model is based on the manipulation of personal information and data and the monetization in a very opaque way. Because also she explained it very, very well. I mean, these models are opaque. So we actually don't know, you know, what's happening with our data, who is accessing it, for what purpose, where it's going. So we have no idea how this marketplace based on data is happening. So if you look at the Data Governance Act from the European Commission now, well, they talk a lot about these data intermediaries, and also about the need for Europe to, you know, share data for the public interest. So how do we manage to, you know, ask these companies, because I think we're never going to be able to build a different business model that's not based on surveillance capitalism, but maybe treats data as a public good, as a common good, on top of which companies and civil society can build new services, new AI-driven services based on very clear rules. We have the rules, is the GDPR. We know what you can do with that data, but you know, now we are paying 3 times that data as citizens. So we pay our taxes, which means we also have to, like, we need to get services with added value, you know, because we're already paying the taxes. Then we are paying those companies with our data in exchange of so-called free services. They're not free, we are paying with our data. And also, we are dependent on these companies for artificial intelligence services that they're selling back to us using our data. So we are paying them 3 times. And obviously, this is unacceptable. So we are getting a concentration of market power. This wealth needs to be redistributed back to society. There is no doubt. How do you do it? Well, on one side, the digital tax, we need to tax those companies. I mean, this is also clear for us European. And now we have a corporate minimum tax that the G20 agreed. Well, we need to enforce that. And also, I think we want to be able to use the data that we produce to improve our cities, to improve mobility, to improve healthcare for everybody. Right? I mean, it cannot be a proprietary thing. So, well, this is the problem with this data. When it comes to regulation, I think, well, here the problem, I mean, for me, the question is we cannot anymore put in contrast regulation with innovation. And this has been a trick that didn't work in the past. So we have to stop saying, okay, you know, we need to break things and move fast. I mean, no, this doesn't work. We actually need this to go together. And I think, I mean, we can change the time of regulation if we understand the problem well, but also if we have the courage to act. So during the pandemic, I just make an example, and then I want to know what you think. For instance, it's becoming more and more, I mean, more and more national governments started to make new regulation to inspect mergers and acquisitions in critical technologies, in particular artificial intelligence. Even the German government, they started to say, look, we cannot afford the Chinese or American companies to buy our artificial intelligence companies because this is a strategic asset. So we need to block these, them to buy them in advance. So not that we make them buy, like in the case of, Facebook, WhatsApp. I mean, we know the problem of mergers and acquisition. They buy those companies because they need the data. And then only after we can look into the problem and say, okay, how do we regulate it? So the government said, no. We're going to inspect it first, and we're going to see if there is a problem related to competitiveness, national security, and so on, and then we will decide. So this is a big change already. And I think we have to go more and more in this direction where we have the courage to act. If we want to ban a technology, I mean, we have seen it with facial recognition. It happened, not in many places, but it happened that governments banned it. I mean, they simply say, we do not know the impact on race, on gender, the biases that it's having. It's having a strong impact on law enforcement, on education, on healthcare. We ban it. We ban it until we know how to regulate it. This can be an approach. Another approach, I have to say, well, the Chinese are regulating their companies. I mean, as of today, if you look at the Financial Times, the news that they are splitting Alibaba into two different applications, Alipay in particular, fintech. One is going to be the payment system, but the credit part, which is the rating system that our data that they classify us, and they say you are a good citizen, you can have access to a mortgage, you are a bad citizen, you cannot have access to a mortgage. This is going to be another company participated by the government because it needs to be accountable for all citizens. Well, I think we will have to get much tougher on how we regulate these monopolies. I'm sorry, it will have to happen if we want then to build alternative systems that are more open, more accountable, fair, and also that give the possibilities for everybody to really create technologies, because otherwise we're going to be in the hands of very few companies. Sorry, I've been long, but not easy to explain.
Y yo iba a añadir a lo que ha dicho Francesca, porque creo que
I was going to add to what Francesca has said, but I think she has placed this conversation very well, that from the technical viewpoint, something that helps a lot is, and has been mentioned before, is the sandbox environments, this safe environments where we can test in prototypes. And there's something related to what you have said about implementing first the regulations or the innovation. Sometimes the problem is that you do not have a safe environment. And I'm talking about Europe because in the States they are stronger in this sense. They're bidding more on their big tech companies. So sometimes you find yourself with a technology or an invention, a model, an AI model, and in order to test this, what you do is you take a data set that you have worked on previously, you have cleaned it, it's ready to be used, and it's a very small percentage. Even if you have thousands of data, this is very artificial in itself because it's almost a cherry picking type of selection. You get this data and you put it together, you clean it up, and then you work on it. So until you reach a real system, it's very difficult to understand different situations, especially those that impact the human beings. It's difficult to tell if a sensor will determine well the temperature of each of the people in this room, for instance, or if it will react appropriately when you receive a warning, for instance. On the other hand, if we want new advances to come about, like the minimization of biases or the autonomous cars, there are many of these environments that need to be worked on or that we need to work in, and this is a way to drive also regulation. If, for instance, there would have been, although I know it's difficult, but if there would have been an environment where to test the algorithms based on food delivery, the way these companies like Deliveroo, for instance, impact on the citizens, we would have been able to determine things such as the way that a weather station can determine the weather in a place, or things like that. And these are necessary aspects that we need to take into account, because it's not enough with the labs that we have. We need these cities or these rural areas where we can test all these things. There's another very well-known case related to drones. They need very wide spaces. They're highly regulated also because of safety measures. But until you get really deep into those testing, it's very difficult for technologies, and in particular the ones that we are talking about, the Spanish technology, the European technology, for it to move forward. We need all this. And also, I thought it was very interesting to see the position of the German government that is protecting their technology. And we have seen cases at Instagram or Facebook or WhatsApp. Google did the same with Google Maps and Waze. Waze is an app that many VTCs and taxi drivers use to move around in the cities, because it can tell you quickly on real time what's going on in the traffic in the cities, and this is what they look for. So we really need to change our perspective, our approach, and understand the way the big techs act and study the monopolies that have been created. And I think that from a regulatory viewpoint, this is key. So for me, the sandbox and these movements that we've been seeing lately are key to understand what's going on in the future.
Una pregunta.
We have time for a very brief question and a very brief answer.
I'm talking in English probably for the precision of my question. I'm a student here in Madrid, and I also work in the German AI Association. So I'm pretty aware of the fact like how important it is to maintain a digital sovereignty in Europe, especially for the industry, but also for the sake of European values. But I think what is also important to get like the people, since we live in a democracy, to get the people on board, to get the trust of the people into the technology. And as we have like somehow a narrative in Europe, it's just like kind of like skepticism for a reason. I mean, like whenever there's something happening, let's say Google is doing like research in autonomous driving and there's happening a crash, of course it's going to be in the news. And we have like the big monopolies in the US. So what do you think, how can Europe, especially to promote like this kind of like solution towards digital sovereignty, how can Europe promote like trust and confidence into these technologies in order to like pursue the good technologies in the long term and have like the people on board?
Yeah. Well, great question. We have to be short.
Yes, please.
Well, let me say, I've done a lot about digital democracy, so I really like the question, because I think all the time, in particular when we do even sandbox or experiments, I mean, today really it's not anymore about the technology in itself. Forget about that. It's about changing transportation, healthcare, education. It will affect like all industries, but also the welfare state, all of us, you know, citizens in our daily life. So we are acting on things that really matter to people. And we have to get people on board, because otherwise the lack of trust, which already is very strong between, you know, the public institution, the citizens, the big tech or the big companies, it's going to increase. And then we don't want to go again into populism and, you know, all that we saw when there is a break of trust. So I think to get people on board is the core. And you can do, for instance, in Barcelona, we experimented this digital democracy platform involving citizens, actually made in Europe, ethics and security by design. It's open source, it's a great technology, it's now used by the European Commission for the Conference on the Future of Europe. So I think it's also a success of how we can scale these technologies. And just people are part of the conversation. But I think that people don't really want to discuss privacy only or cryptography or data. They want to discuss, do I have rights if I'm a gig economy worker, if I work for Deliveroo? I'm gonna get like my rights. Can I access a mortgage? Can I fight climate change because my city is too polluted and we're gonna die? You know, people wanna talk about this real issue. So I think technology should favor that the conversation is about the real challenges that we're facing as society. We're changing society, and it's going to be through technology, but it's not about the technology itself. And I think this is the big thing, you know, it's like we're not gonna get people on board otherwise. We have to get the message right. And finally, I think for Europe, for me, very important, we need to have those conversations, but it's not only about that. So Europe cannot just set the ethics, cannot just set the philosophy, the regulation. We have to build these technologies here. So companies like yours, so we need to invest in these technologies. We need to get our research centers to build these capacities. We need to have civil society also involved, the unions, the politicians, the political parties. We need those. I mean, this conversation, not only to be a conversation, but to be an action. Because we do need to, otherwise it's going to be, yeah, I mean, Europe talks about it very well, but you know, at the end of the day, this is not happening there. So we want to change also this narrative as well.
Tenemos que dejarlo aquí, tenemos que cerrar este...
So we need to wrap up this exciting discussion. Thank you very much to Telefónica. Thank you all for coming along. I would like to encourage you to continue on what Francesca and Nerea have said. There are many talks, many interviews on the media, and I encourage you to follow the Hey Festival agenda that is about to kick off in Segovia, where Sheila and his team are waiting for you.